When it comes to places that boast signs saying stuff like trespassers are forbidden, are you the kind of person that's intrigued by breaking the rules, or do you just go about your merry way without a second thought? I know for me personally, it depends on the situation, so let me know your take in the comments, and stay tuned until the end of today for another edition of comment section shoutouts, and let's discuss some places that you might not want to risk exploring. How about we start off today with none other than the door to hell over in Turkmenistan. Well, Joss Whedon led us to believe that the entrance to hell could be found in Sunnydale, California. He was actually around 7,500 miles off. What can I say? I'm a big Buffy fan. Located in the middle of the Karakum Desert in Turkmenistan is the Door to Hell, a name locals gave to a 230-foot wide crater that simply won't stop burning. Another nearby gas crater is fenced off and smells of natural gas, or should I say reeks. Now, the early years of the crater's history are kinda uncertain. Relevant records are either absent from the archives, classified, or inaccessible, which that's a little spooky. Some local geologists have claimed that the collapse into a crater happened in the 1960s, and it was set on fire only in the 1980s to prevent emissions of poisonous gases. Yikes. Others assert that the site was drilled by Soviet engineers in 1971 as an oil field, but collapsed within days, forming the crater, with the engineers choosing to flare the crater to prevent emissions of poisonous gases, but underestimating the volume of said gas. When Soviet scientists began searching for oil back in 1971, they just accidentally hit a methane reserve, and the drilling platform collapsed, thus forming said crater and releasing all those bad gases into the air. The scientists were like, let's light this on fire to try and burn off the methane, creating a Dante-esque anomaly that has remained lit for the past 50+ years. In April of 2010, President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedow recommended that measures be taken to limit the crater's influence on the development of other natural gas fields in the area. In January of 2022, the president announced plans to extinguish the crater, citing harmful effects on local health, the environment, and the natural gas industry. A commission was established to find the optimum technique, but despite the president's intentions, the crater remains open and burning. Just last year, the American and Turkmen governments discussed ways in which they could cooperate to permanently seal this thing. Now, that would require two things: putting out the fire, and then stopping the gas from seeping out of the earth. The first step is considerably easier than the second. One could, for example, spray quick-dry cement into the crater, removing the oxygen-rich air that fuels the fires, but then the methane's gonna find other routes to the surface, adding another leaking methane source to the country's woeful tally. That means the only way to properly suffocate the gate to hell is by smothering the leak at its methane source, and short of a massive nuclear device, nobody knows how to do that, and trust me, you don't want another nuclear device in this atmosphere. So while we might not consider this evil by any demonic means, in terms of the environment, it had to top my list today. Next up, we have another tourist destination you might not want to visit, the Gomantong caves in Malaysia. For starters, I know the government of Canada is already advising against visiting this country as a whole because of a high risk of criminality and specific crimes I can't mention on the internet, but these caves are pure geographical wonders, with limestone walls reaching up to 300 feet in some spots, but visitors often leave the site describing it as one of the most disgusting wildlife experiences they've ever had. Oh, you want to know why? Well, that's what I'm here for. First things first, Gomantong is home to more than 2 million bats, which leads to an impossibly thick layer of guano, otherwise known as bat poop, covering the ground. And don't even think about slipping because the handrails are apparently just as filthy as the floor. And hey, if that hasn't spooked or disgusted you enough yet, don't worry, I'm not done. If you can make it through the river of bat droppings, or the deluge, you'll then encounter several million Malaysian cockroaches just scurrying around. Ugh. I know personally speaking, the thought of visiting anywhere with cockroaches, or like that many cockroaches, is gonna send me running for the hills faster than you can say follow the yellow brick road, so no. Absolutely not. Wherever the bat dung is, that's where the cockroaches will be, which essentially means everywhere, and that's everywhere I'm not gonna be. Finally, if you get past the bat smells, the cockroaches crawling up your legs, there are several other wonderful creatures you might just happen upon. Oh, what are they? Oh, my worst nightmares. Otherwise known as snakes, scorpions, freshwater crabs, and the infamous giant Scutigera centipedes, which are poisonous critters that are at least 3 inches long. How this place is considered a tourist attraction and not a death trap is beyond me, because it sounds like somewhere that should be just burnt. I don't do well with bugs, and the fact that there are venomous and poisonous creatures there? Absolutely not. Here's another doozy, the Beelitz-Heilstätten Hospital in Germany. So it might not be a bug fest, or a burning pit of hell, but allow me to tell you why this place that's creepy beyond means should be avoided. Between 1898 and 1930, the complex that's roughly a 15-minute drive south of Berlin served as a tuberculosis sanatorium, which, ooh, A 600-bed complex equipped with the latest technologies allowed patients to revel in the country air and undergo the primitive surgery that was standard in the pre-antibiotic age. The patient pavilion, which included terraced balconies used for air bath treatments, was divided into 4 quadrants. The women and men were housed on the west and east ends, respectively, while the north-south axis divided the contagious quarantine patients from the others. I almost feel like this goes without saying, but any buildings that used to host sanatoriums or mental institutions of any kind are almost guaranteed to have a heavy ghost presence. There was a lot of bad things that I can't talk about in detail that kinda happened in those places. It also housed mustard gas and machine weapon victims during the First World Yikes event, including a young soldier who went on to become the evil German dictator whose name I can't say, who had been wounded in the leg. The hospital later went on to become a major treatment center for Yahtzee soldiers during the Big Bad Event No. 2, and it was used as a Soviet military hospital from 1945 until the fall of the Berlin Wall. In the chaotic interim between the fall of the wall and German reunification, a serial killer known as the Beast of Beelitz began to terrorize local women connected to the sanatorium, using specifically pink lingerie to rope necklace them to death or gag them, and then laying the garment across their corpses. Later identified as Wolfgang Schmidt, he was eventually apprehended and sentenced to 15 years in detention in a psychiatric ward. In recent history, specifically in 2008, photographer and sadist Michael K. brought young model Anja P. to the site for a photo shoot in its abandoned operating theater. He then lured her to a small apartment available on the edge of campus, slugged her to death with a frying pan, and had intercourse with her corpse. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. Today, a few hospital wards are used as neurological rehabilitation centers, although the majority of the complex is abandoned. The surgery and psychiatric wards have both been left to decay and give way to nature and vandals, and the result looks like something straight out of American Horror Story, which is not exactly an enjoyable day trip for the easily spooked. I can sort of just sense the evil seeping out of there, so no thank you. So before I start getting jittery, let's go back over to the States, specifically Centralia, Pennsylvania. A lot of rhyming today. From the late 1800s to the 1960s, Centralia was a quaint but bustling town in Pennsylvania, thanks to its prosperous coal mines. Mining town. Should have known. However, when a mine mysteriously caught fire in 1962, the flames began to spread underground via the interconnecting tunnels. Although the citizens were aware of the situation, they weren't truly troubled until 2 isolated incidents some years later. A gas station owner reporting abnormally high gasoline temperatures in his underground tanks in 1979, and a youngin' nearly falling into a 150-foot deep sinkhole in his backyard in 1981. After those really weird occurrences, the town's population plummeted. Burning for over 50 years, Centralia, Pennsylvania's mine fire certainly seems like the fiery lair of dastardly demons and spirits. And what's more, the fire heats the groundwater to boiling temperatures, causing steam to just randomly rise from the ground. On certain days, this gives this town's landscape an unsettling, misty appearance. Speaking of that landscape, the mine fire burning under the town has left large patches of ground devoid of trees and life. Because the fire heats the surface to such a high temperature, tree roots die and the vegetation withers away, and these areas are particularly visible in the burn zone, which is near the southwest edge of the town. With only a few buildings remaining, this town is clearly an abandoned place. Most of the residents said, "See ya" a long time ago, leaving only trace signs of their lives there. As of 2021, only 4 residents remain, although it seems like a complete ghost town if you were to try and visit. Also, it has more people buried there than it has living there, which, if you're gonna drive around, you're gonna see 3 cemeteries: St. Ignatius, Saints Peter and Paul Orthodox, and Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Hey, if you ever find yourself in the deserted city, you're gonna find a lot of torn down buildings, crumbled sidewalks, and the cracked, graffiti-filled Route 61. And just in case you forgot why the town is deserted, you can occasionally just see smoke billowing out from the subterranean fires, which scientists estimate will continue to burn for another 250 years. No biggie. Alrighty, how about I end today with an abandoned island, specifically the island of Poveglia. So this island is located in the lagoon near Venice and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from going here because it was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick, to prevent the spread of disease and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. So in 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice, and Poveglia, like many other small islands at the time, became a quarantine colony. Whew. This plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, and fearing the unbridled spread of the disease, Venice was like, okay, if you're showing any symptoms, here you go, out you get, not here. At the island's center, the dead and those too sick to protest were kind of burnt on giant pyres, and this included the tens of thousands of citizens dying on the mainland. Now these fires would burn once more in 1630 when the Black Death came sweeping through. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil, so I hope it's a good fertilizer? The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented, by the way, on the patients there with lobotomies, and he jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he had been driven mad by ghosts. I wonder why. Decades later, nearby residents still claim to hear the bell, even though it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work had started, but stopped without any explanation. Okay, maybe I don't want to visit there. And that brings us to the end of our time, which means it's time for comment section shoutouts. They're all gonna be from top 5 scary horror vampires you'll be glad aren't real, because I love how much y'all loved that video. Layer Mistress said, yes, the original silent Nosferatu is my all-time favorite vampire movie, even though Bram Stoker's widow, Florrie Belcom, sued the filmmakers for plagiarism for obvious reasons. And besides the creepiness and suspense, there are some moments that are truly hilarious. You just have to know where to look for them. Knight Rider? Never heard of that one, though I love one of King's earliest novels, Salem's Lot. Well, I definitely recommend giving The Night Flyer a watch. I feel like you'd absolutely love it. And Ed Rosen 9600 said, I'm glad none of them actually exist. Not even the sparkly ones from Twilight. Hey, I beg to disagree. I wouldn't mind meeting some of them. Alrighty folks, that's it from me. I've been Alexa, your resident ooky spooky girly, and if you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more banned content from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.